about President Obama and the current Obama administration. Ed Klein, welcome to the George Jarkesy Show.
Hey, George, how you doing?
I got to tell you, I was just taken back by the inside look that you had by interviewing more than 200 people that were close to President Obama over the years, and what you were, able to sort of bring public about how that works inside that White House there.
Well, thanks so much, George. I've been a journalist for longer than I care to mention, and for this book, I was able to interview many present and former members of the Obama administration, a lot of congressmen and senators, both Republicans and Democrats, White House correspondents, African-American political leaders who were there for Obama when he started off, Jewish American donors who have made it possible for him to raise an awful lot of money. I've, really done the whole spectrum, both on the left and on the right, to do The Amateur, this book of mine.
Now, Ed, I want to step back just 1 minute, all right, because so often mainstream media, who has not done well with your book. I mean, they've not given you good reviews so much. They've tried to ignore your book. And despite that, you've gone to be the number one best-selling book in America right now, which is amazing and tells you something about the book. But I want to go into your background. You're not some lightweight. You're not some guy that just decided to write a book yesterday. You had been on the foreign affairs editor at Newsweek magazine. You have 2 degrees from Columbia University, and you were the former editor of the New York Times magazine. I mean, you're a serious journalist that has this incredible book that gets very little attention from the media.
Well, it's true, and if it weren't for radio programs like the George Jarkesy radio show and your audience, no one would know about this book, The Amateur. But thanks to your radio show and others like yours, The Amateur has been the number one book on the New York Times bestseller list it's going on 5 straight weeks, George. And I hope and think and pray that it will make a difference in this presidential election campaign, because what I have said in The Amateur is that Barack Obama is not suited by temperament, personality, character, experience, credibility to be president of the United States. He, unlike, say, a Lyndon Johnson, who didn't give good speeches and couldn't read from the teleprompter, knew how to use the levers of power in Washington. Barack Obama occasionally gives a decent speech and certainly knows how to read from the teleprompter and has nice ties that he wears. But he hasn't the first clue how to get things done in Washington, except to do it by dictatorial fiat, by, saying this is the way it's going to be, whether you like it or not. He does not. He goes outside the Constitution. He doesn't use the Congress to get things done because he doesn't know how to do it. He is lost. He's the amateur.
Yeah, he's the amateur. I'll tell you, 7 years in the Illinois State, a Senate, not very impressive. 2 years in the United States Senate, also not very impressive, not there. And then he goes to the White House, and you were privileged to have a lot of data about this meeting that happened 5 months into his presidency. Can you tell us about that meeting that he had at the White House?
Sure. He invited, yes, of course, George. He invited 9 historians, all of them very liberal, to his presidential historians, to the White House after he was there for only 5 months and 10 days. And during that period of time, during this dinner, when he was eating lamb chops and holding forth about his views, he made it plain that his view of what he ought to be was what he called a transformational president. He wanted to transform the United States into his vision of what it ought to be. He said that he believed in what is called state capitalism, meaning that the government, in cahoots with big business and big unions, should run things from Washington. was tried by Mussolini in Italy during World War II and before that, and in Europe, and it has never worked, of course. After this little speech he gave, he said that he was thinking of calling his administration the New Foundation. And one of the historians there, Doris Kearns Goodwin, piped up and she said, "Mr. President, I don't think that's a very good idea." And he said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because the New Foundation sounds like a woman's girdle." And, of course, that broke up everybody. And I later spoke to a historian who attended that meeting. I interviewed him for a long period of time, and he said, you know what, this guy didn't understand that he really believed that he was a messianic figure, that he was going to come in and save us from ourselves and change the way this country is run, and it just isn't going to work.
Well, I got to tell you, Ed, there's so much that I want to get into here today. I want to get into the Valerie Jarrett piece when we get back from the break. That's been referred to as sort of the Tom Hagen as Vito Corleone's consigliere and the Godfather. I also want to talk about some things that are sort of socialism or communism in nature from that dinner. Mm-hmm. So when we get back, we've got Ed Klein with us, the author of The Amateur, and he's going to stay tuned with us. Now, you can find this book at georgejarkesy.com. You can read it there. Also, we're going to have today's show, and you can listen to every show at georgejarkesy.com. But do stay tuned. We've got Ed Klein, the author of The Amateur, on. Do not touch that dial.
There's something that I got to say. It's sure making me upset with what's happening in my country today. You know, the federal government's trying so hard. The numbers.
Now, we have with us the author of the book, The Amateur, and it's the #1 selling book on the New York Times list. And Ed Klein is joining us back here. Ed, thank you for staying with us through the break there.
My pleasure, George. My pleasure.
Now, before the break, you talk in the book, in your first chapter, you open it up with the story of Bill and Hillary Clinton talking. Can you just give us a brief overview of how you got to
Sure.
the title of the book?
Yeah, I'd love to. About a year ago, in August 2011, actually, Bill invited a group of people to his home in Chappaqua, New York, which is just north of New York City. And Hillary was there, Chelsea was there, and a bunch of friends and political hangers-on. And he revealed that he had done a secret poll that showed that Hillary, if she ran against Barack Obama in the 2012 Democratic presidential primaries, could beat him. She didn't want to do that. She felt it wasn't loyal. But Bill then went on to say why he thought she should run. He said, the people around Barack Obama don't have a clue about what they're doing. They don't understand how the real world works. They've lost us our AAA credit rating for the first time in American history. And as far as Barack Obama is concerned, Barack Obama, said Bill Clinton, is an amateur. And that's how I got the title for my book, The Amateur.
Yeah, it's just amazing. Such a limited service. No building a business, no long time in Washington, no governor. I mean, he just popped up out of nowhere.
And he hasn't learned anything in the almost 4 years he's been in office. You know, there have been presidents who come in who haven't been prepared. Harry Truman or John F. Kennedy really wasn't prepared when he was elected president. But during the 3 years he was president before he was assassinated, he grew in the office, as did Truman. But this guy has not grown in his office. And I think, one of the people you mentioned at the beginning of your show today, just now, who sent you an email about Obama's narcissism, his arrogance, his unfounded self-confidence, this is one of the reasons why he hasn't grown in office. He thinks he's got the answers to everything, that he's above it all.
Well, let me give you an example. From your book, you said here that at this dinner where the 9 historians attended, he had only been in office about 5 months, he injected that the regulatory hand of the federal government into the American economy in an effort to create a more just and equitable society. Now, if that's not at bare minimum socialism,
or Marxism,
and I would say it's leads more toward communism. I mean, the arrogance to even make the statement that you can control markets with the Fed. I mean, that's like a flooring statement to a guy who's has an economics and finance background.
So the message of my book, The Amateur, is that you've got this guy who is not only an amateur, but is an ideologue, a left-wing ideologue, and that is a poisonous mixture of incompetence and far left-wing socialist ideology. And that's why we've got to get him out of this office.
Now, tell me about Valerie Jarrett briefly. She referred to the president as gray eminence having vital influence in French. But give me a little bit of background on her involvement in the White House.
Valerie Jarrett was a political appointee of Mayor Daley in Chicago, and she was called the blackface of the Daley administration. She hired Michelle Obama to work with her in the Daley organization, and it was a crony kind of job. And it was Valerie Jarrett, because of her own background. Her parents were very wealthy. She came from a very upper-class African-American family. She introduced the Obamas to people that they had never met before. The creme de la creme, the top rank of African-Americans, Jewish Americans, Irish Americans, political people, and so forth in Chicago. And these were the people who launched Obama on his career, and it was Valerie Jarrett from the very beginning who was their closest advisor. And to this day, she is in the White House as a chief advisor to both the First Lady and the President, and has the power to attend any meeting she wants to attend. She's the last person to leave the Oval Office after a meeting. She whispers in the President's ear. She goes upstairs at 6:30 at night, has dinner with the President, First Lady, and their daughters, and the First Lady's mother, Marion Robinson. She goes on vacations with them. None of the people in the White House do this except Valerie Jarrett. She has incredible power, and
now she also
nobody's heard of her hardly. It's amazing. She's like, as you said, a consigliere of The Godfather, if you know what I mean.
Well, I got to tell you, I didn't say that. It actually came from one of your reviews by Bob Adelman, which is he put that in there. But let me say this. Oprah Winfrey was very close and had a huge effect on helping President Obama get in the White House.
Right.
But this Valerie Jarrett actually helped sever that relationship with Oprah Winfrey, which I got to think has been pretty harmful to the president.
It has been harmful because Oprah, who was, as you say, pivotal in getting him the Democratic nomination, and she did that at some cost to her own ratings, because a lot of people didn't like the idea that she was suddenly a partisan political person. Oprah expected to help the president when he got, Obama, when he got to into office, with his communication strategy and television, things she knows a lot about. But the First Lady and Valerie Jarrett didn't want Oprah in there. They didn't want her having a direct line to the president, because they wanted to control that. When Oprah offered to do an Oprah Winfrey show launching the First Lady's anti-obesity campaign, Michelle Obama held a meeting and said, I don't want some rich fat woman being the emblem of my anti-obesity campaign. That got back to Oprah. She heard about that.
Wow.
And she, washed her hands of this whole thing, and she has announced publicly that Oprah Winfrey, is not campaigning for Barack Obama in 2012.
Well, Ed, I got to tell you, the book, The Amateur, what a amazing book, and what an amazing rise. The fact that nobody really wanted this book to rise up and the fact that it has. I want to thank you so much for being on the show today, and I want to thank you for your book, The Amateur, and give us a insight into this current president and what goes on there at the White House.
Thanks for the opportunity, George. I really appreciate it very much.
All right. Thank you so much. That was Ed Klein of The Amateur. This is the George Jarkesy Show. You can learn more at georgejarkesy.com. You can get the book, The Amateur, there. We've got the president of U.S. Gold Bureau coming up next, talking about rare coins. So don't touch that dial. It could cost you money.